putting your shirt on?
I mean, I got it on. Work. No one knew. Thomas is blue. Edward is blue. James is green. No, red.
James
Percy
is red. That's
green.
why he's so vain.
See, good to know. I mean, we're just trying to get all the most important things handled here. And Kerry, we're going to talk about Europe.
Yes, Chloe and I got together in person to see Hampton Court Palace in Greater London. So we'll talk about that. And then we can talk about your photo habit, I was thinking, because you developed quite the addiction.
Hi, everyone. Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, welcoming you to The Backpack Show. Your hosts, Chris Brogan, Kerry Gorgone, Boom Shakalaka.
Backpack Show. We did it. So you went to London. That's why I got to be host the other day all by my own self. We did try an on location, which was spotty because, internet in another country can sometimes be spotty. But Hampton Court Palace, why did you pick there? What was the reason? And how did you convince our pal Chloe to meet you over there?
Well, first and foremost, I was in the UK moving my oldest over there. So I have two kids, and the older one is transgender. So we'd moved out of the South because of the laws there. And now she's been wanting to really live somewhere else altogether, like outside the US. So she's got some friends in the UK. So that's why I was over there primarily. But she kind of, once had her like safely delivered to her place, she kind of didn't want me to hang around. So I went down to London, and I had planned this in advance to take a couple of tours of Tudor palaces or places relevant to the reign of King Henry VIII, because I'm a history buff. And so I've kind of studied up and read up on like King Henry VIII and his wives, and even going a little further afield than that into like the War of the Roses and some stuff that was happening in France at the time and all that. So I'm just kind of an enthusiast. So anyway, I wanted to see Hampton Court Palace because it is one of Henry VIII's Tudor palaces and has just a ton of history. So Anne Boleyn and Catherine of Aragon and Cardinal Wolsey and all these people you've heard of, where like you can walk in their footsteps there. So that's why I wanted to go.
Okay, so Tudor. Every time I hear the word, I think two different things. I think of a Porsche because it has two doors, and I think of people who help you with classes. What does Tudor mean? So when you say it's one of his Tudor palaces, did he have Tudor palaces down the way, or like what does Tudor mean even? Do you know?
Henry Tudor, Elizabeth Tudor. It's how the royal family in the UK right now, they style themselves Windsor as their last name. It's like their last name.
Oh, got it. All right. So it's just like Henry's palace. All right. So Hampton Court Palace, where is it located? Probably like right beside Big Ben, but to the left of Parliament, or?
No, it's actually a little further out than you would think. It is 12 miles southwest of central London, right on the River Thames. So it's not technically in London. It's like in Greater London. You know how people, when they list a house, are like on Airbnb, they're like, oh, like we're in Greater London. It's pretty fun. It's kind of far away. I don't know, like proximate. And it was home to Henry VIII. And I said his wives, but like not like he had more than one at a time, but the succession of wives lived there too.
So you get out there, Chloe gets out there. It's just basically like you two roaming the place. Like, is there even anybody there, or?
It's packed. So first, I don't even know, like bless Chloe for coming at all, because this is such a weird nerd hobby of mine to read up on this history stuff. I can't imagine anybody else is interested, which is frankly why I took these tours for when I was alone, because I was like, nobody in my family wants to go for sure. And bless her, she was so sweet, and she came down and hung out with me. So there's me and Chloe, yay! Right before we embarked on our big adventure. I don't want to speak for Chloe, but I myself had a great time. So I made a few videos if you want to see them.
I'm so into it. I'll move out of the way so go ahead and shoot.
Okay, so the places that we visited were packed, but we had our dedicated tour guide. So this is us in the car. Hi, it's Kerry from the Backpack Show. We're going to see Hampton Court Palace today. Me and my friend Chloe. Say hi, Chloe.
Hi.
And our tour guide, Mark. Say hi.
Good morning. Hello.
We're going to have the best time. All right. See you later when we get there. So I feel like I should tell you it's Timescape Tours. I'll have to grab the URL before we're finished. But so we had a dedicated tour guide from Timescape Tours who took us around and who's very knowledgeable and answered all of our questions. And I love having my own tour guide on these things because it's so hard sometimes to hear when there's like 50 people in a group. So yes, I'm a little princessy, which is probably not inappropriate considering we're touring a royal palace. So thank you for that. Here's our first look at Hampton Court Palace.
What should I say?
Chloe, Hampton Court Palace.
Hi.
Look.
Look at this.
This is the best part, right? The first moment people see it.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of best parts, really, but it is quite an impressive Tudor pile, isn't it, really, with all the chimneys and everything. So, yeah, should we go in?
Like,
So-
no.
Why does he say Tudor style? Because of all the chimneys? Is that like that family really liked chimneys? What? That's a really weird sentence.
He actually does explain it. And let me see if it's in. I think there's this video in which he explains it. So I'll just play that for you. Hampton Court Palace. Wow. First Cardinal Wolsey's and then King Henry VIII.
So this is base court, lovely base court. And this is kind of, this is a Tudor hotel, isn't it? Have a look around. You can tell you're going to be well looked after. You know how? Because of all the chimneys, look. And what that told you was that there was a fire in every room. For you, and then you had a room for you and for your man as well. So
My man has a
it's gonna
room.
be very
Had a room for my man. So yeah, that's a particular interest to him because it meant that you had a fireplace in every room. That's why the chimneys.
I
So
see.
you'll be snugly warm.
So you do.
What I was saying is that Hampton Court Palace belonged originally to Cardinal Wolsey. He was like Anne Boleyn's nemesis, kind of, Catholic cardinal who was working really hard to serve King Henry VIII and tried to get him an annulment from the Catholic Church. But the prince at the time was like, nah, forget that. So Wolsey was like sort of out of favor when King Henry VIII wanted to marry Anne Boleyn. But before that happened, him and Henry were like really solid buds. And Cardinal Wolsey took this little palace that he bought and made it ridiculous. It was like it'd be featured on an MTV show if they had those, showing how amazing it was. And so Henry's like, wow, that's like pretty nice. It's nicer than anything I have. And so Cardinal Wolsey had to give it to him. Because you can't have a palace that's nicer than the king's. That's like not cool.
That makes sense to me. All right. So why this? Why Henry? Why? Because like what you just explained, there's like pretty soap opera-ish. Like, what does it mean to you? Why is this an important part of history that you sort of delve into?
That's why. Well, so it's hard if you are an enthusiast of history, women's history in particular. It's hard to find those stories sometimes because unless the women were famous, like queens, princesses, that kind of thing, their stories aren't captured. Women were personal property of their husbands, and that was kind of the end of the story for them, their fathers and then their husbands. So I've studied women's history, which means studying queens, for a while, only because there's no other option if you want to know history. So King Henry VIII and his 6 wives are probably just like a gateway drug because there's so much written about them. So I think that's why.
What would someone's fate be like at this time if you're a woman? Like Anne Boleyn, what was her life like at the castle?
Such a loaded question. So, okay, what a lot of people don't realize is Anne Boleyn, King Henry VIII's second wife, for whom he broke with the Catholic Church and created a whole new Protestant kingdom. She was only queen for 3 years. So they were actually in the process of making apartments for her at Hampton Court Palace. And by the time they were ready, she was already dead because he had not gotten the son he so longed for. He wanted a male heir. And he was done with her. He was ready to move on to Jane Seymour. So they trumped up some charges against her, ridiculous stuff, not just adultery, but like incest and just crazy stuff, because he really wanted to be done with her. So like kill it with fire kind of thing. So yeah, she was gone by the time her apartments were ready. So life, was like really good for a little while and then not so much, if you get me.
So he made a whole religion. I'm back on this. He made a whole religion just because he didn't like what the Catholic Church had to say. So he said, I think I'll make a new one.
He didn't make it up. There was a movement at the time, a Protestant movement across parts of Europe to change the way it was like a religious reform movement, basically. So the Pope would not be the head of the church. You could speak to God yourself in prayer. You could read the scriptures yourself. These ideas were considered heresy among the Catholic Church at the time, because in the Catholic Church, the priest was the only one who read the Gospels, read them in Latin, told you what they meant for you and how you should live. And that was that. You did not speak to God. The priest spoke to God. So it was a pretty like novel idea. And that was enough to get many, 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 many people killed, burned, or wars broke out and all that stuff. The reason that this had appealed to King Henry VIII was because he wanted to get rid of his first wife, who everybody loved, right? She was like a very devout Catholic princess of the blood from Spain. So nobody was like anxious to see her go, but she was past the point of giving him a male heir. So he very much wanted her gone. Now, the appeal of this religion for Henry was he would be the head of the church and he could give himself a divorce. And there was nobody between him and God at that point.
Well, I was just thinking about the fact that it's interesting that this is one of the things that you're super fascinated in, and that we could just make a show about it if we want, because we use a product called StreamYard. So you can make a show just like this lickety split, super easy. You could just upload all kinds of photos and videos, no problems, no mistakes, no errors, just runs. And StreamYard, so cbrogan.net/StreamYard. Kerry, you have a lot of photos and videos and things from this. Tell us a little bit more about what we see in these. Let's do a little tour.
I wouldn't say a lot, Chris.
You have more than 3 photos and videos, so.
Okay, so the reason that I was so anxious to see these palaces is partly because in the US, we don't have very many things that date back too far, like because we're a new nation relatively. So this is one of the only chances I would have to walk in the footsteps of people that I've studied.
Listen, I'll have you know that we have a White Castle right here in the US.
Their burgers are quite tasty, from what I understand. So, all right, what are the first things you notice when you walk into Hampton Court Palace? You're in the courtyard. There's this thing that looks like it should be a fountain. It is, in fact, a fountain. It is a wine fountain. And we were trying to figure out how this worked at the time because, of course, there wasn't electricity. So here's us talking about it.
Is how they powered it. I mean, did they have a man inside? Probably a very drunken man with a pump handle in there doing this, I can imagine.
One of the kind of features of Tudor hospitality when they would have a big event, there was this wine fountain. You're supposed to be able to go get unlimited wine, but like, how did that work? That's what we're trying to figure out.
So if you brought like Ziploc bags, you could just pour some in your pockets for later and have bagged wine several hundred years before.
Reasonably sure some people did that, probably. There's also this really cool, what do they call it? An astronomical clock in the courtyard there. So let me see if you can see it there up at the top. If you get really close, you can see that it's got much more than just the time. It's got the time, the month, the tides on there. When you can tell when the tide is low and when it's high. I can't read this thing. I mean, I can read the numerals, but I can't read like the rest of it. But evidently still correct, still running. You can see it's got your astrological sign, like what month we're in or whatever, all this stuff. So that was pretty cool. I was really impressed with that. But the appeal, like I say, for me is literally walk through a corridor that Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII, Jane Seymour had all walked through. It's the stones there are worn down from the footsteps of so many people whose histories you've read about. So yes, I'm a nerd. I'm a proud nerd. I know this kind of stuff is really boring to you.
No, it's. I'm not interested in the subject matter for the subject matter. I'm interested that when people get excited about something, like of all things you could pick. I mean, like autistic people. There's a massive amount of autistic people who have a predilection for trains. I find that's interesting. Like why trains? There's several other mechanical vehicles out there. There's so many other devices. So why castles? Why Tudor? Like why didn't you pick Victorian times or something? Like what makes one pick the time frame that they're into?
So I think, like I said, there was so much rich history around King Henry VIII and his wives because they were all women of different origins, different backgrounds, and they mostly met bad ends. So his first wife was a princess from Spain, and they were happily married for like 20 plus years. But when he did not have a living male heir, that sort of fell apart. Then Anne Boleyn, she waited in the wings. It was like 7 years before he could figure out a way to marry her. So, I mean, who wouldn't be interested in that? But she was an English woman. She was from like a good family, but she was not a princess of the blood. So, a lot of people made fun of King Henry VIII for throwing over Catherine of Aragon to marry a commoner and have a girl. Like, who later, of course, the girl becomes Queen Elizabeth I, one of the most successful monarchs in English history. So it's sort of funny he was so obsessed. Three of his progeny did end up on the throne. Mary, his daughter with Catherine of Aragon, Elizabeth, his daughter with Anne Boleyn, and then his son, who didn't live terribly long, died as a teenager. But Jane Seymour, his third wife, finally gave him a son. And then she died, which I think is why he liked her the best, because she didn't live long enough to get on his nerves.
I just want anyone who's watching the Backpack Show right now to think about this for a minute. Carrie's not looking at any notes or anything like that. She's not reading from some script. She knows this stuff. So I think you said your tour guide's name was Mark. You were either an insufferable guest for this guy, or it was exciting to him. Maybe a little this, a little that. What do you think?
Chloë could give you an honest opinion because she was, of course, there, and she is not a nerd like I am. She is a definitely not nerd. So for her, she was hearing these stories for the first time, and I didn't interrupt him or anything. I was there to learn stuff. I was also there to have the experience, see things. I did not talk over him. I would occasionally let him know something that I knew about what he had just said. But I like to think I wasn't insufferable. I hope he seemed excited to learn anything he didn't already know. So I think he was looking to augment the tour as much as anything else. There was a ton of school groups there, by the way. I feel like I have to say, check this out.
Get out of the way, people.
Place is like thick with school groups. Chloe and I were at Hampton Court Palace on a weekday, like a Friday, and just wall to wall. Kids from different school groups. I went the next day to Hever Castle, which is in Kent, which was the childhood home of Anne Boleyn, and that had tons of people too. So I like to think that love of history is alive and well, but realistically, it's like a field trip is a field trip, right? So the kids were just excited to go. One thing I wanted to show you was the Great Hall in Hampton Court Palace. So you may have heard of William and Mary. William of Orange and Mary. They were English monarchs, overthrew Mary's dad, James. And they were going to destroy Hampton Court Palace in favor of making a big Baroque place that looked sort of like Versailles. But they were going to keep the Great Hall. I don't want to say that's good news because that would be mean. They died before they achieved their goal of destroying most of Hampton Court Palace, for which I'm actually pretty happy because I got to see what I wanted to see. But the Great Hall would have been there either way. So just check out the Great Hall for a second. Oops. Those tapestries would have been a lot more vibrant during the time. They've obviously faded with age, but they had a display for a while where they found the original colors of the tapestries on the back, the parts that weren't exposed to the sun, and projected them onto the tapestries, and it was like incredibly vibrant. So I would love to see it. But in the Great Hall is one of the only places you can still see the Henry and Anne initials together. He had them erased from everything, but they missed a spot. I didn't get a picture of it. It's way too high up, but it's way up in the rafters of the Great Hall. You can see H and A, which was pretty funny during her coronation. People were laughing at them like, ha ha, because people are mean. But there's these things called eavesdroppers. If you look up in the Great Hall, let's see if this is so you can just see it. Way up is a little head. There it is, a little head. And they were supposed to remind you to kind of mind what you said and not to gossip because somebody would for sure hear it. So I thought that was sort of funny because who can't use that reminder? Like gossip. is not necessary.
So we have a comment in from your guest on this one, Chloe. She says, I got 2 tour guides. Mark was great leading the way, but secretly we both knew Kerry held all the jewels.
Oh, that's so nice of you to say. She's very sweet, and I think she'd say that even if I was insufferable. That's my theory. But we got a really good look around and learned a lot. So let me see if there was anything. Oh, I'm just going to show you a couple things just so you can sort of get a sense of the palace itself and see scenes that places you might recognize from movies and shows. So this is Fish Court. And it probably didn't smell very good. Literally Fish Court. I have a picture of it, but I didn't upload. There's a pipe. This is so funny, but there's a pipe that you can see in that video, and it has the coat of arms on it for, I think it's Queen Victoria. And Chloe and I were just laughing because we're like, yes, it's very important that everybody know that this regent put this pipe up, but they do that with everything, mailboxes and pipes and like grates and buildings. It all has the coat of arms on it. So it's kind of funny.
So these castles, I mean, I imagine it costs more than like, I don't know, 10 grand a year to keep these things up. Why is that thing still standing? How come they haven't like knocked it down and put up an Arby's?
History, tourism. I mean, you saw how many people are there. It's part of what makes the UK, what makes England specifically worth visiting for people. I mean, I think there's a lot of talk and has been for many decades about the monarchy and the expense of it and whether it's worth maintaining. But I don't think anybody over there, even if, let's just say they switched away from the monarchy altogether, I don't think anybody would be like, yeah, let's destroy the palaces now. It's such a part of their history. And it seems to me that the United Kingdom people value it.
So I was trying to cue you up to tell me this thing you told me once that like, I don't know, some other people that you really like, these other rich dudes from the US bought it and did something or other with it. And yeah, I was like, I hit my ping pong paddle and I hit the ball to you and it went and fell on the floor. So
because that wasn't Hampton Court Palace.
This is a different castle? Okay. They're all the same one to me. Tell me the story I'm not getting right. You can say it quick.
Hever Castle in Kent was Anne Boleyn's childhood home. Started off its life in like, I don't know, 1100 or something insane. It's really old. And it was a bailey, like a fortress. And then, I mean, it's still pretty small. Like it's not big. It's interesting that it's a castle at all. But anyhow, it's over the years it had become, I mean, people were like doing animal husbandry in what was the Great Hall. It had kind of come down since Tudor times. So what I wanted to go there and see, it was Anne Boleyn's childhood home, but after her death and King Henry VIII's remarriage, political marriage to Anne of Cleves, who he ended up not liking, he decided to annul his marriage to that third wife, Anne of Cleves. And because she agreed to it and gave him what he wanted and went away quietly, he gave her Hever Castle and I think Richmond Palace. So anyway, 2 of his wives lived there. That's why it was of interest to me. But it would not be there at all, in my opinion, if it wasn't for the Astor family. So they bought Hever Castle. And I don't want to say they restored it. Partly they did, but they also made it kind of, they put in like Tudor authentic details, hired artisans who could build a gallery, say, for parties, so their band would have a place to play, but they did it and make it look like Tudor stuff. So they did restore part of it. They kept what was there, but they also changed and embellished it. But it wouldn't, like I said, it wouldn't be there at all if it wasn't for the Astor family. So yes, that's Hever Castle, not Hampton Court Palace.
I'm so wrong. I get all my castles and palaces mistaken. It was just a bailey, everyone. It was a bailey. So at Hampton Court Palace, they have that fountain in the front that flings wine up. If you go to Hever, you can get Baileys, and you just put it on some ice with a little bit of cream, and you're handled. I think that's what you're saying.
No, but they did have a moat. They have a moat at Hampton Court Palace, and it's like, so the Astor family, when they bought Hever Castle, they have a moat at Hever Castle. The Astor family wanted a big lake, so they literally paid 200 dudes to go out and dig them a lake so they could boat and stuff. I don't know, rich people doing stuff with their money. He used, I want to say 10% of his fortune to bring Hever up to speed, like Hever Castle. So I don't know, 10%, it's not so very much, I guess. If you got it and you want to spend it, that's cool. But Hampton Court Palace, like I said, was of particular interest to me. If you don't know anything about Tudor history, it's probably really boring, but it's still, looking at it, you would think, wow, this is pretty incredible, because so many different English monarchs did live there, like William and Mary, Queen Anne after that. And, I mean, the list goes on. But for me, of course, the appeal is kind of where all the drama started. So divorced, Catherine of Aragon, beheaded, Anne Boleyn. And then another one died. Jane Seymour died after giving birth. And then he married Anne of Cleves, who he thought was ugly. So he said, I'd like to not be married. And she was like, okay. And she got palaces and went away. And then he married, Catherine Howard, poor little thing. She was a teenager. And I think sort of maneuvered into position for Henry VIII to take an interest in. She marries him, cheats on him, and then gets beheaded as well. She was so young, stupid young, like 15 or something crazy. And then his last wife, who actually managed to survive him, Catherine Parr. So I have a little video of the privy closet where he married Catherine Parr. It has like the year and everything. It's kind of interesting. This is why I like going to Hampton Court Palace. There's so much history there. So that's the actual room that they were married in. It had the year. I missed. It was like 15 something. I missed it. But I love being able to actually be in the chapel where they worshiped and the place where they got married and all the places of all this drama. There's one place, it's called the Long Gallery in Hampton Court Palace, where they've got, portraits and stuff. But it's famous as the place that Catherine Howard, the teenage bride, she was denounced. And they said, you're never going to see Henry again. You have to go and she was arrested, basically placed on house arrest. This is the myth, is that she breaks away, runs down the gallery screaming to see Henry, because she thinks if she can just talk to him, maybe he'll spare her life. And evidently, people who are ghost enthusiasts will tell you that today you can still see her ghost running down the long corridor of the Long Gallery, begging for mercy. I did not see ghosts while we were there. But that's the inside. There's a lot to see. If you've watched the movie The Favorite with Emma Stone, you might have seen pieces. I'm going to show you a little bit of the kitchen, just a couple of seconds.
Yeah. Did you ever see a film called The Favorite?
Yes.
Well, you're in for a treat, because this is the kitchen in which Emma Stone plunged her poor hands into that bucket of lye.
Oh no, spoilers. Some kitchen. As seen in The Favorite, y'all. Look at this thing. Can you imagine the heat? I mean, that's insane, right? But that kitchen feeding all those people that came to the court to hang out, like basically hangers on. It's a lot of cooking.
So one thing I want to tell everyone who watches the Backpack Show is that if you ever run out of things to say to Kerry or ask Kerry, you just say, hey, tell me anything about Catherine of Aragon or something like that. And she can do this all day, I think. Like, you have so much knowledge of this. It's so impressive. I'm impressed. I know it sounds like I'm making fun, but it is an impressive body of knowledge for not anything to do with the job, just like a thing you're into.
Just think about the photo walks you could take, is what I would say. This place is stunning. Even if you don't know anything about the history, stunning. Chloe's absolutely right. So Anne of Cleves proves sometimes it pays to be the ugly duckling. I don't think she was ugly. I think she was perfectly attractive, to be frank. But when she first saw Henry, it was a little bit of a disaster. She was not familiar with the ways of like English courtship, and he liked to disguise himself and play games. So apparently he did that. He put on a disguise and entered the room with a bunch of other random dudes. She has no clue what's happening or who these people are, let alone that one of them is him. He goes up to her and kisses her or something. She's like, what the hell is happening? She's incredibly horrified. And he decides in that moment, because he sees the unadulterated horror on her face, that he doesn't think she's so hot either. And that was kind of the end of that. But nobody told her. I mean, you're supposed to know that he does dumb things like this, and you're supposed to know which of these dum-dums he is, because he's like a head and shoulders taller than the other guys. But she doesn't know any of this. So can you imagine being from another country and you're just like accosted by some random? So I don't think she was ugly, Chloe. I think she was unfortunate in her lack of training, I guess. But no, it was beautiful. And trust me, if you go, you will find a lot of fun places to take a photo walk. I'll show you the garden and then I'll stop because we're almost out of time. Yes. So pretty. And that's like a tiny, tiny sliver. There's many more gardens. I took pictures. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see I posted some photos there. On LinkedIn, I put some also. I've gotten very into taking photos, kind of inspired by you, through windows of windows. There's something so powerful to me about sharing the view and perspective of people that I've read about and admire from history. So I love that. Like this, I'm looking out this window that Anne Boleyn looked out of, or that kind of stuff. I'm a nerd.
You are, but a very entertained and educated nerd, as it would seem, because you've covered a whole lot of ground there. That is an impressive amount of ground.
We know nothing, but I found out a lot. Reasons to visit. Just a reason to visit.
That.
Oh, and here's our person of the day. Kaboom!
I mean, it's basically the Chloë show. Let's all be serious. Leslie says, it's beautiful. My dad asked one question. Was there much rain or was it just overcast?
There was in bursts. The second day that when I went to Hever Castle, it was raining, like pouring, bucketing down, then sunny, bucketing down, then sunny. And the fun thing about that is there was a wedding planned at Hever for that afternoon. So I don't know how it turned out for them.
Might be a rainy wedding for them. Well, what I like about this the most is that there's no lifetime or in which I'm going to go visit that castle. So you and Chloe took care of that for me. It's all handled. And now it's, I just can move on. I can just think about this day. I can think about how much I just learned. I know that the actress Jane Seymour was also married to Henry back in the day, and everything's handled. And John Cleese.
Wow. I would like to thank Chloe for coming with me on my nerd adventure. And I will invite you anytime if you want to come, because it will be fun. Also, I think that our tour guide from Timescape Tours really liked you a lot.
So you know what else?